Greetings, everyone. My name is Larry Hansen. I am Chief Marketing and Sustainability Officer for Conference Direct. And joining me for our podcast CD Live is Adam Briggs, who is our co-host. And we also have two of our people that support marketing for our customers. First is Susie Prue with Brand Engage, and then Matt Martz with Conference Direct. So welcome, everyone. And what we thought would be good today is talking a little bit about the climate that's going on outright for meetings and events with marketing, specifically with growing attendance and finding new exhibitor sponsors for increasing revenue. What we have seen really impact our customers this year, especially association, is some of the new recent changes out there with international travel being down, tariffs potentially increasing, government spending being reduced. These are all things that are impacting our customers, both on attendance and exhibitor sponsors. So we wanted to kind of give you some best practices on how to address these and kind of move forward to hopefully keep your revenue as intact as possible. So we're going to break this into two parts. First, we're going to be talking a little bit about exhibitors and sponsors and increasing tools or increasing that revenue. So, we'll start with Susie. Her focus is definitely on increasing exhibitor sponsors. So Susie, maybe talk to us a little bit about how Brand Engage kind of supports your customers, and then I'll talk a little bit about some other questions if you want to get started.
Absolutely, and thank you so much for inviting me, Larry. It's a pleasure to be here and talk about this shifting landscape and making sure that we're honing in on the right tools to continue success from our conferences to date. So just as a quick overview, Brand Engage works with clients to help not only stimulate revenue from the sponsor and exhibitor side and annual partnerships and whatnot, but we also work to help develop the right tools in what type of offerings do we have? What does our prospectus include? What type of marketing can we pull together? And then how do we manage that so that we're continuing that engagement and growing this landscape? Because this is a huge revenue stream we don't want to ignore. My number one thing in honing in on this changing landscape from the exhibitor and sponsor sides is number one, keep them involved. Talk to them about how some of your attendees are starting to pull back on some of their travel, the restrictions. Come together as a group, perhaps generate a focus group of 1 to 5 of your top tier sponsors and exhibitors. And let's figure out a path in how to make sure that this doesn't change what our meeting is going to do. So everything from hosted buyer appointments. This is an opportunity for your sponsors and exhibitors to basically pool together their funds to help get your folks over here. But even if money is not the issue necessarily with your association attendee, we can kind of go back to the starting point at COVID where we worked in some virtual options and some ways to engage folks virtually, whether that be some great hosted buyer appointments one-on-one that you're able to set up as quick 10-minute appointments for your sponsors. The good news is your sponsors and exhibitors genuinely aren't impacted by this change as much as our association attendees are. So while we're experiencing this from an association landscape, your exhibitors and sponsors likely are eager to help you make sure that we don't hemorrhage this. So these hosted buyer appointments, working with your sponsors to pull in those tools, perhaps their attendance brings in another attendee. What are our competitors doing? Are there other associations going through similar things? Learn about that. That's not cheating or anything like that. That's just really kind of working together saying, how are we going to combat this? So that's another avenue that we want to make sure we touch on. In terms of the attendee standpoint, enforce your cancellations. I mean, there's dollars that are involved in there. If there's a safety issue, certainly we want to be respectful to that. But let's understand what percentage of your overall attendance is being impacted. Is it 25 to 30%? That's a very different landscape than perhaps 1 to 10 attendees that might just be impacted a little bit by travel. So it's kind of knowing a little bit where the gaps are, what maybe the problems are. Is it solely dollars? Is it fear? Is it a bunch of other things? But keeping your exhibitors and sponsors involved is step number one. And then kind of working through these other opportunities and ways they can contribute their dollars and resources to help bring those folks on site.
And that's great. So let's say we've got these new exhibitors and sponsors, or even overall, you know, retaining them is key. And I want to open this up both to Susie and Matt. Susie, what's your philosophy on kind of ensuring that you retain those exhibitors and sponsors?
Great question. My best programs are the ones that at the end of one event are already securing spots for the next one. It automatically is a no-brainer way to help generate revenue before you're even starting to really think about the revenue for the year. So number one rule, enforce on-site rebooking for your future events. If you know where you're going to be next year, I've worked with clients. We don't have a floor plan yet. It's okay. Do we have a location? Do we have dates? Do we have a prospectus, at least from this past year? We can work on that. So that's tool number one to make sure we're bringing them back. Number two, it's a lot of research. It's going out there. It's finding the types of companies we're seeking. Maybe the leadership from your association is interested in kind of developing into a certain segment or a membership area where we see growth. Let's hone in on that. And you bring in somebody like a brand engage or a partner of Conference Direct to find those folks, to do that research, to bring in those marketing and sales people, to make sure that we are always constantly expanding that landscape. Your list of potential exhibitors and sponsors should only be growing from year to year. So if you're starting to see a decrease in that, or people are moving on, let's stop the hemorrhaging now. Let's find a way to keep that list building, because the wider net that we cast, the more folks we're going to bring in to harness that.
Yep. And Matt, I know you worked with a lot of different associations and companies on this. What is your some best practices for retaining these exhibitors and sponsors too?
Absolutely. Susie, was hitting the nail on the head of ensuring that you're working as actively as possible to secure the sales on site. One of the other aspects is listening to your current set of exhibitors. So receiving that feedback, being thorough and creating a highly effective exhibitor survey and sponsor survey that can be launched at the conclusion of the meeting, so that you're collecting all of that just critical feedback. What worked, what didn't work, where can we make some improvements? And when exhibitors see that a change, even if it's a minute change, has been made, but that their feedback was taken, that almost always solidifies them saying, you know what, I am going to sign up because you did hear me and you did take that to heart and we appreciate it. And so that's when they see a lot of value in their investment and are willing to look at this as a multi-year partnership versus a one-off.
Yeah, it's great.
Are you seeing a greater emphasis, and Susie Prue as well, in kind of exhibitor advisory boards, or involving them more in terms of what kind of ROI they're looking for and ways to help improve the ROI?
Yes, that is a great point. And Matt also honed in on a great point too. Bringing in, like I said, that advisory board, that council, kind of your tried and true folks that want to support your association, that are linked with your messaging and content, having them be a voice as part of what that overview of your event looks like, to a degree, obviously, is a huge asset. And kind of piggybacking on what Matt said too, if we're able to bring in some elements of customization, that's key as well. So I'm a firm believer, sure, you kind of have the rough bronze, gold, silver packages and just kind of lay a landscape out. But if you're willing to kind of break down some of those benefits and deliverables so that they pertain to each of those sponsors as they need it to be, that's another great tool for making them feel like they're really woven into the fabric of your association, and you want them to be there. That helps solidify a trust and growth in the process too. But I agree with everything Matt said as well.
One of the things definitely we have seen in the meetings industry on trade shows is hosted buyer programs. And I think, at the end of the day, exhibitor sponsors have one goal, is to increase their sales. So Susie, talk to us about your feelings on hosted buyer shows and why those might be important.
I love that, because to me, that's a great way for win-win in benefits of the attendee and the exhibitor sponsor. So the way that a hosted buyer program will work is essentially your sponsor is covering the cost of registration for some of your attendees, With that coverage of those attendees, the attendees do have to participate in dedicated one-on-one time with said sponsors and exhibitors in order to earn that complimentary or discounted registration. This offers an opportunity, if it's advanced enough, there are tools out there where your hosted buyer participants, if they're interested in that, can select different types of sponsors or vendors they're interested in meeting with. And likewise, your sponsors and exhibitors can also go through the same tool and say, these are the types of attendees we're really looking to connect with to make it of value to us. The tool will often marry the two, and it basically puts together, for a quote, for lack of a better term, a speed dating opportunity for folks to connect one-on-one and really talk about their programs, what they're looking for in vendors. And it's a huge win-win. The attendee gets a complimentary registration, and they're meeting with partners who are going to elevate their experience. And likewise, your sponsors are getting value. Like you said, Larry, they are there for lead generation and working to build their portfolio as well. If they can bring back solidified leads that are going to potentially utilize their services going forward, that is the penultimate goal of any of our sponsor and exhibitor engagement most of the time.
Yeah. So these have been some great feedback on exhibitor sponsors, but there's the other side of the pie, which is attendance. And there's some potential challenges coming up with lack of international or reduction of government travel, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm going to kind of turn it over to Adam, talk a little bit about how to increase some attendance for attendees.
Yeah, thanks, Larry. And obviously, without the attendees, it's hard to drive ROI for the exhibitors, right? So the
Yeah.
first and foremost, we need to make sure that there's people at the event. I love the push for more of the hosted buyer that you're talking about, Susie. I do think that that's a proven way to help attract attendance, maybe when budgets are cut. But we do have this political pressure in terms of whether it's international. Even right across the border with Canada, we have some customers where they've got friction for crossing the border to go to an American show. What are you seeing in the marketplace in terms of some strategies to help reduce friction for international attendees?
So that's a little bit wishy-washy right now with me because it's so different in every different landscape. And I'm not as much tied to the attendees. I'm kind of in sync within marketing to the attendees, but I work alongside a lot of the folks that are marketing attendees to come, and we're saying, what is happening? What are the hiccups? Is it just we're nervous to come back? We're afraid that we're going to be stuck and there might just be a travel ban. That's what I'm seeing on a few of them. In that case, we're starting to implement how can we keep them engaged as much as possible from afar. And it doesn't have to go away. Their participation can still very much stay. I never believe that it can be as wonderful as being in a one-on-one personal thing. That's exactly what we do. But if not, we can triage a situation. But we want to make sure that we know that it's not a long-term thing, that we're working through this. We're changing our landscape to make sure that you feel as comfortable as possible coming to our association. It's just a bit on a larger scale that we're working with, and we're just going to have to wait till the dust is settling a little bit and we're getting out of fight or flight mode with the new administration in, good or bad, folks are starting to see that change. So I would say just kind of talk to your attendees, see how they want to be engaged, see how you can bring that back to your sponsor and exhibitor community and say, we have these international attendees who are feeling this impact. Let's kind of find this way to either support their content and education and learning from afar, ways that we can make sure that we're bringing them back for the future. Maybe it's complimentary and discounted registrations and hosted buyer appointments this year and in future years. Again, piggybacking future involvement to keep them invested. So it's not like, yay, great, I was virtually involved and now I'm bouncing out. No, we want to make sure you stay committed into 2026 and 7 and not have this completely change your affiliation with the association that you're attending.
Yeah, Matt.
And Matt, I know you work with a lot of associations that are our customers. What are some of the best practices you've seen out there for increasing attendance?
Absolutely. And Susie's correct. I mean, with uncertainty causes more delays in attendees booking their hotel stays or just making that final click to say, yes, I'm paying the several $100s or even several $1,000s for registration, right? So it's it's also that communication that maybe what we've used to have done is communicated fairly generally to both international and in-state attendees. And now that messaging has to be slightly more custom to recognize that there is uncertainty and there is maybe more barriers to them attending. So that could also manifest itself in ensuring that we're communicating more on the programs and sessions and networking opportunities that are critical to them, that might be separate or just less of a focus for some of our national attendees. We talk about, how do we also pay attention to and balance this, knowing that there is uncertainty and we have delay in registrants, but we have food and beverage minimums, we have rental costs, we have AV fees, and a lot of those are highly connected to attendance. And it gets so difficult to adequately prepare for the number of attendees that you're going to have when what used to be a 2-month out type of a nice push and a big up swing in registrations now is becoming more like a month and a half to a month. And so that's where we're looking at incentivizing registrations early bird bookings, but also recognizing you might say that this is an early bird deadline and you're already preparing to push that deadline back by another 2 to 3 weeks. You're planning ahead, but at the same time, you're almost planning to be flexible to employ a number of tactics. So you may, instead of doing a lot of paid marketing and advertising 6 months out, maybe we're doing incremental growth and then we're really not hitting it hard until about 2 months out. So it's tweaking the model a little bit more to try to get the most bang for your buck, knowing that everybody's working with a little bit of a tighter budget.
Well, Matt, I think, the other piece is you have to know what the problem is before you can start talking solutions, right? Because even international, there's a half dozen different reasons why it might be down, and it could be a combination of them, right? Some of it might be budgets, right? Depending on what the exchange rates are, all of a sudden it becomes a really expensive proposition. It could be a visa issue where, either visa timing or visa acceptance rates, or maybe it's just general concern over immigration and getting stopped at the border, or maybe it's a political statement. So that there's even the bundle of like a drop in international attendance could be for a number of different reasons. And I think one of the things that is a takeaway for people watching is do the extra work and survey your attendees to find out why there are concerns, because unless you know the answers, you can't really put the right solutions in place. You can think and maybe you'll guess right, but ask the questions.
Absolutely.
And piggybacking that, I'm sorry, Matt, I didn't mean to jump in, because a lot of times your exhibitors and sponsors will gladly share with you their goals as well too. You don't need to assume it for them. You bring them in and you start asking those questions. They're happy to share with you their goals, what they're looking to do with marketing. And if you're transparent with them on these issues, they'll gladly throw some ideas of here's how we might be able to help. So don't feel like you need to have that plan completely in place. You have team members that are willing to share their thoughts as well to help build that up. So just piggybacking on that.
Yeah, no, and it's critical, and also recognizing that with different barriers, it also means that if you want those international attendees, you might have to beef up a little bit more within your organization on having letters prepared to be able to provide to those exhibitors or sponsors that state why it is that they're coming to assist in that immigration process or that visa process. And so there's a slew of tactics and tools that will help make their lives easier. And if you're willing to take that time to develop those materials, it's like a package for your international attendees that can be handed over to them and say, this is what's going to get you over here and back home in the most efficient way possible. We want you to be here. That goes a long way. And we've employed that for several of years in some of the programs that I've been a part of that were more manufacturing based, where they were selling products in the United States. The United States was their market. And so there's a definite desire, but organizations, associations might need to do a little more legwork than what they've used to done.
Now, a group like that, are they impacted by the government uncertainty in terms of what's called the Doge effect, in terms of is it their grants or budgets or people that are attending? And if so, how are they working around some of that?
It's huge. It goes back to really that uncertainty. And I know I also work with several nonprofits. And so as the nonprofit sector is dealing with this uncertainty of, oh my gosh, are we going to have a budget? Are we even going to be able to pay normally, which we would normally do for this employee to go? And then let's even add in this other aspect of environmental. Just off of a program outside of just inside of Pasadena, where the terrible Palisade fires happened, and the convention center that I had been prepping for the last year was turned into an emergency Red Cross shelter, and that didn't disband until about 2 weeks prior to us arriving at the conference. And so, working through whether it's Doge effect and money and funding for some of that travel, or natural disasters that continually seem to be occurring a little bit more frequently. It's really revolving around communication and making sure attendees understand the program is still going on. We still want you here, that it is safe. And then also, again, having those resources available to be able to say, hey, if that funding gets cut, maybe we have to look at more of a flexible refund policy, or a policy that allows you to move that registration over to the following year. So it's really becoming a lot more creative in the way that we work and function, that it's more of a, we got to be open to those conversations than maybe in the past.
Great. One of the things, Susie's strength is on that closing and that personal connection, but, there's definitely a lot of digital tools out there. We use Feather really more for attendee, and then there's another tool we use, Avenda, that's really focused on new exhibitors, sponsors. But this is open for both Matt and Susie. Maybe start with Susie. How do you work with digital tools, and what are some best practices around that?
Oh, that's a great example. I will be honest in saying my AI scope is just starting to grow, but I will say everything from the attendee app, email distribution, social media, those types of digital marketing streams are huge, especially when it comes to my role with exhibitors and sponsors. If there's ways that they can connect with not only the audience that's attending, but the greater membership of the of the folks that are maybe not just going to be there at your conference or your event, but going to be exposed to that brand throughout the year, this is where I'm seeing a huge push. A lot of these exhibitors and sponsors want to look outside of just meeting face to face, which they love, but then what are you doing for me the other 362 days? How can I make sure that I'm keeping things top of mind to your community well beyond the day that we happen to wave goodbye from being on site? So those tools I find are key, mostly beyond the event space. When they're there, they're honed in on one-on-one connections, networking, activations, engagement opportunities, anything that they can use to talk. But then the digital piece starts to take more of a lead beyond the conference date in making sure that we're reaching those folks. So how else can we do that? Feather is a great tool with that. And there's lots that are growing out there, and especially in the AI scope, where they're looking to create those synergies for you beyond the event itself. So, but I'll segue to Matt too. He probably has some other good thoughts as well.
Sure. No, this is great. Feather being a phenomenal platform. I'm also seeing quite a few platform vendors that are trying to be one-stop shops, right? So they want to handle registration. They want to handle the mobile app. They want to also handle now what I'm seeing is content and that recording and production. And then being able to transform or utilize bits and pieces of that for future marketing opportunities or for additional revenue streams. So let's say, as we're talking international and some of these barriers, not to the levels that we saw at COVID, obviously, but some international folks are probably looking at it and saying, well, look, I would love to be there. I just can't make it work. Can I still participate, right? And then from a sponsorship standpoint, we look at it and we're like, yes, we want you to sponsor. We may not be able to have you here in person, but it would be wonderful if maybe we could get you to sponsor that the recording and production of our sessions, and then that and your branding is then included on those materials that get shared with attendees that they have access to for the remainder of the year, things like that. So it's also leveraging some of these newer tools that are being developed and connecting with the right vendor, obviously based on budget, but who's going to help you get to what those goals are.
I think the other piece is the personalization. And we could talk for hours on AI and all the ways that AI is going to affect events, but I think low-hanging fruit is to leverage tools using AI to help facilitate networking, right? So AI-based recommendations on exhibitors that might, have products that suit your role and your function. AI-based recommendations on networking with other attendees. AI-based recommendations for content. So there's a lot of different tools out there now that are really leveraging AI to take people's experience at the events to the next level to really help with that, the attendee ROI as well.
Yeah, and I think, the thing I've learned about the digital tools are great for developing the lead, but then it's so critical to have someone like a Susie that comes in and closes and really spends that personal time with the new lead, because it's one thing to track that through a Feather or an Avenda, but they're not the closer. They're not the one to really give that personal attention. So, it's always the shiny new penny, but you need that personal connection is, I think, critical on closing, a new lead, so they're great for developing, but not necessarily the closing tool.
And one other thing that I just want to, when you're thinking, there's a term out there called endemic marketing and non-endemic marketing. So for the most part, when we're having a conference, the majority of our exhibitors and sponsors and providers are tied into the tool that our association is pushing. For example, if there's a Paychex HR conference, you'll find a lot of benefits providers, insurance providers, perhaps folks that make certain tools or software as it relates to those things. But let's take a step back and talk about the demographic of the attendee. Who are these HR professionals? Are they women? Are they within a certain age bracket? Are they men? Then it's important to think of the non-endemic partners who might be able to come in and tie into that. I hate to be, stereotypical, but coffee vendors, wine vendors. Are there daycare providers that might be interested in that? If you have that women ages 30 to 45, I'm just trying to think of something that's not necessarily in the scope of their professional world, but in their personal world and who they are as people. I usually try to target approximately 10% of that exhibitor floor landscape to involve something that's a little non-endemic, that's something fun and something personal for your attendee to tie into. It helps with engagement, activation purposes, and in theory, that's their target market for that vendor. We had a great example of this when we had a 24-hour codathon, and it was a game playing, and then it was coding and et cetera. And they had Sega and all of these cool PlayStation, Sony, et cetera. But the number one sponsor, none of those folks, Mountain Dew, because the demographic of the folks coming in drank Mountain Dew. They were up, they were late night, but you have to take a step back and think outside that box. And I think when we're faced with these challenges, I think that that's a very important tool to make sure that you bring to the table, and not have your strategic partnership or sponsorship salesperson just kind of, they're just selling sponsorships, they're off on their own. Bring them into your group. They should not be on a silo. They should be part of attendee marketing meetings, part of food and beverage meetings, part of audiovisual meetings. What are we experiencing as a whole in producing this event? And let them hear that, because they probably have some great ideas to bring in those sponsors, maybe not for cash, but to hopefully offset some of those expenses too.
What Susie's hitting on, right, is this idea of how do we leverage big data? We have platforms, we have abilities to purchase, we have own databases that these associations or organizations have. And that can be a little frightening to some folks to think about it and go, that's a lot of data to digest. But the outcomes to spending the time digging in it and organizing it and leveraging it is that exactly that. It's also easier to sell sponsorships and exhibit space when you can better refine almost down to a point of who's attending, why are they attending, all those demographic pieces is what we can then share to use it as a means to say, look, don't just believe what we're saying, look at the data. The data is what's speaking and why you want to be in front of this group.
Yeah, that's great.
Excellent. So we're kind of at the end of time, Susie and Matt, but maybe if there was one or two like takeaways that you want to make sure that people keep with them from this talk, what do you think people need to really take home in terms of whether it's strategy or a tip to help implement? What's your final talking points?
For me, I would say keep them involved. Keep this number one. Keep the exhibitors and sponsors transparency. It's key. There's no need to hide this. We're dealing with this throughout the nation. You know, there's nothing that you need to feel like you need to solve on your own. Involve them and work to include them. Secondly, the person that's in charge of your strategic relationships and selling these things should be part of the greater production team. They should be involved in what we're spending money on, where we're encountering issues, whether it's attendees not being able to attend or ways that we have to augment the program in general. Let's figure that out so that they can go back to those sponsors and say, this is where we need assistance and help, and let me help you do this for us. That's a huge piece of it. And then the third and final thing is just that cool idea of a hosted buyer opportunity. I don't want you to throw that out there until it's needed. Again, what Matt and Adam said earlier about let's really understand what the problem is before we just start throwing ideas at it. But I do think that there's ways they want to help you, and they're not as impacted in theory about the attendance. So use them, leverage their ideas too. They're there to assist as your partner, not just a logo on a screen and a check. There's ways to engage.
That's great. And I would say that I would just reinforce and let folks know there's so much uncertainty happening right now. It's all around us, and it's not just impacting meetings, events. It's impacting everyone. And because of that, I would just say that it's okay to plan ahead as we do, as we all are. We're planners, and yet still leave room for flexibility to say there's the unknown, and that we may have to regroup and we may have to re-strategize a little bit and tweak how we're going to go about this. And that's okay. That's not a failure on any of the planning part. It just means we're being sensitive, we're listening, we're getting a feeling of the nuances. And I would just also say that, you know, again, because it's not just impacting one organization or one industry, I would also say stay close to the Visitors Bureau, to the venues, to all of the vendors that we're working with, and also communicate to them and tell them, hey, we're in some uncertain times. We're seeing our numbers are just not what they typically are. Can you work with us? We may need to, you know, extend some deadlines so that we can get our numbers where they need to be, or we may need you to hold off from ordering some stuff until we can see, like, yes, we're going to be 800 people short. We got to mitigate expenses, right? So it's also having those conversations with everyone that you can, that you're going to be working with to produce this meeting or event, and just say, let's be transparent. We're a team here. We're all feeling this. If you work with us, we're working with you, and we want to just make, at the end of the day, this a really successful program. And I have seen so far that there is a deep willingness and understanding that we're all in the same boat here. We're all after the same goal, and we'll all make it through. We just have to work together a little bit closer.
Excellent. Well, thank you both for joining us today. This is a great talk. It's definitely a timely talk, and you know it's ever evolving. So be ready for that return phone call. We might get back for the latest trends.
Absolutely. Thank you, Adam.
Susie and Matt, thank you. You guys have a busy year, I'm sure, ahead of you with all these changes. So that's a good thing for you.
Yeah.
But we appreciate your feedback, and thank you again for joining us today.
Thrilled to be a Conference Direct partner. Thank you all.
Yes.